In this lesson, I want to give you some hints on how to study. Of course, you've done a lot of studying already in your life, but there's a good chance that you might still be able to do it more effectively. By more effectively, I mean that you learn and understand more and improve the ratio of learning and understanding to the amount of effort you put in. There is an analogy I like to use about teaching and learning. It's similar to being in a restaurant. The chef makes the food, but you have to cut it, put it in your mouth, chew it, and digest it yourself. It helps if the chef has made the food appetizing and presented it well, but if you don't do your part, you won't get any nourishment. This analogy means that, perhaps unfortunately, the process of you learning things is an active one on your part. Simply sitting watching these videos, comfortable though it might be, isn't really the best way to learn everything. I've built this course carefully, and I believe that you would learn a lot that way, but you can learn more and understand more with a bit of action on your part. Let's take a look at some specific techniques that can help you study effectively. The first techniques relate to the idea that you should get involved with what you're trying to learn. Your brain is built in a way that attempts to filter out the uninteresting, to make room for the important. What it believes is important isn't necessarily what you believe is important, so you have to persuade it to take interest in the things that matter to you. The first thing that has to happen is that you have to take an active role in what you're learning. There are many ways to do this. You can stop and think about what is being described. Just pause the video every few sentences and play it back in your head to yourself. Think about what was just said. Did it really make sense to you? Or was your subconscious just nodding and going, uh-huh? Take the time to correlate the ideas presented to Java code you have written. If in the past you wrote something that behaved in a way that surprised you, did you just get the explanation of why it behaved that way? And do you now really understand that behavior? Equally important, do you see how to use the behavior to your advantage, not just as something to avoid being tripped up by? Most of the language of Java is the way it is for very specific, carefully considered reasons. And if you can see the purpose, you'll remember the facts more easily, and you'll be able to make better use of the language going forward. If you haven't written code that illustrates the topic being discussed, go ahead and do so. Try to ensure that you can take total control of the language, that you can make it do just what you want and, as just discussed, use it to good effect. Imagine a number of related code scenarios, predict what you think should happen in each, and then go and code up those examples and see if your predictions were right. Personally, I'm a great believer in understanding things rather than simply learning them. Actually, I think it's very likely that every educator shares this view. There are two compelling reasons for this. First, the organizational system of your brain works better with things that you understand than with things you merely know. If you understand something, that something has relationships into many other things. These relationships are like hooks, and the more hooks one thing has into other things, then in a very real way, the less likely that thing is to fall out of your brain. The second reason understanding matters is that while you can repeat things that you know, you can use things that you understand. This, I think, is even more important in the long run. Sure, you want to get a certification and you probably want to do it as quickly as possible and move on with life. But if you actually understand things, not only will it make it easier to remember them and pass the test, you'll also be better at your job too. And that amounts to getting double benefit for arguably less effort. It turns out that the way we form memories is a little surprising too. Our brains mostly form long-term memories when we remember things. Huh? Yeah, the fact that we bothered to struggle to remember something tells our brains that this is something important enough to be worth making into a strong long-term memory. So when you write code, or when you do the exercises or sample tests, be sure to try to do them without prompts. Make the effort to recall things for yourself. That will help you to do so again more easily later. I have an example of this of my own. Years ago, when I was about 10 years old, I played a part in a school production of Gilbert and Sullivan's The Pirates of Penzance. I learned the words and sang them to myself all the time. I can still remember most of them to this day. These days, I like to sing karaoke, and there are some songs I've probably sung 100 times. But guess what? I can't remember the words. Yep, you guessed it. I always read them from the screen, so my brain doesn't attach any importance to actually making a long-term memory of them. This course is structured as an exact match to the objectives of the exam. This is both a good and a bad thing, and I struggled with the choice for a long time. The reason it's a bad thing is that the objectives are not really well organized for the purpose of teaching the language. On the other hand, this course assumes that you're largely familiar with the language, but that you might have some holes in your knowledge or some mistaken understandings. On that basis, it seemed more important to organize the course in a way that would help you with the primary purpose, that of passing the test. And to do that with confidence, I felt it was more important to address each objective face on, even if they're in a slightly odd order with some unexpected overlaps. So that's what I did. I hope that understanding the reasoning for that will be useful to you too. You'll find yourself looking in detail at things in the order that the exam objectives happen to address them. But provided you're not trying to learn Java from scratch, it's unlikely this ordering will be a big problem for you. Frankly, even if you don't have a background knowledge of Java, you can probably still handle the ordering of the topics, provided you're reasonably familiar with the general principles of C-like syntax and object-oriented languages. You'll probably notice that many lessons start very basic indeed. The intention is to avoid making assumptions about what you do and don't know. Each lesson will pick up into its full level of detail soon enough. With that, I think it's time to take a short break and then dive right in. See you soon.